My bad. Can you hear me? Can you see me? We've got an official reboot of the internet. I've got my webcam plugged in. My mic should be sounding a little bit clearer, hopefully. But I apologize, guys. That was a little bit bad, and that is my fault for sure. So I don't really know what's going on. Maybe it's one of those times because it's cold weather. People aren't out, and everybody's having a movie night or whatever in the neighborhood, and the internet is just like full stream mode. So sorry about that, guys. Hopefully you can see me a little bit better this go around. I don't know if you can hear me any better, but maybe you can see me better. And let's just get right back to where we were. Daniel, Ron, Sean, thank you guys for jumping back in. I don't know if we're gonna get Alan back because it sounded like he was maybe a little bit upset. But I apologize, guys. Sean says my cranking setup is that die with the tulip, but it's not the glass. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not glass composite. It's their shallow cranking top water rod. It's a 7-foot medium regular action. 120 bucks. Cool, man. Good to hear. I will definitely check them out after this stream. See if maybe Discount Tackle carries them, because obviously I'd prefer to buy from there, but we'll see. Alan's back in here, my man. Dude, thanks for coming back. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully the internet's a little bit better. Little side note, as I was rebooting my internet and looking for it to show back up on my computer under Wi-Fi networks, one of my neighbors, well, one of my neighbors has a Wi-Fi network called Bitch Ass Net. That's pretty funny, huh? And tonight it's been kind of that, right? Now, I shouldn't be one to speak because my Wi-Fi network name is absolutely ridiculous and I probably need to change it. So I will say, and I will admit right now, a little bit embarrassed, but I created this some 10 plus years ago. My Wi-Fi network name is pretty fly for a Wi-Fi. Yeah, not kidding. So anyway, one of my neighbors had, if you've got young ones trying to log on to the Wi-Fi, but it is what it is. Sean says, if you want to go a step further, the Rebellion, they're both stupid light for glass. Okay, cool, man. Yeah, of course, man. Offspring was the deal back in the day. And all the girlies say. Yeah. So yeah, I grew up in that time, man. I'm 33. I was a big Offspring fan. Nothing could beat Blink 182 though, if we're being honest. One of their first album was the best. My very first concert that I went to at like 13 years old, something like that, was Blink 182 and Green Day. Green Day was headlining. Blink 182 went before them, and MXPX opened the show. I don't know if you've ever heard of MXPX, but that was a sick little punk rock show. I was big into punk rock back in the day. So, yeah, man. Now, we can talk about that for Chuck Berry. I should know what you're talking about, Ron, but I don't, man. What you talking about, Willis? So, guys, this big blade chatterbait from Z-Man, I don't know about it, if we're being honest. I'll pull this thing out for you guys to see one more time, because I did show you last stream, but I just want to emphasize one more time how ridiculously big this blade is. is the Jackhammer Chatterbait. Side by side of water. It's heavy. The blade is. Um, and so it pulls an awful lot. That was the first thing that I noticed when using it, is that it felt like I was using a deep diving crankbait with just how much thump and how much pull there was on the rod. So I don't know how much of a fan I am of that, if we're being honest. It's a cool concept, but I will probably not throw it very frequently because it has a slower and harder thump. The thing pulls like crazy. Um, and Sean, you say it would be killer in stained water or at night. Yeah, this thing would be killer in super stained water. No doubt about it. That orange blade is wicked. But but I don't know. Nighttime, a straight up black and blue jackhammer has absolutely slayed for me this summer. So um, I don't know. I I went back to throwing a jackhammer uh, today. It's crazy. I can tell this jackhammer right here that has not been fished must have either had the skirt starting to fall apart straight out of the pack, or I just felt like reinforcing it straight out of the pack, and I've wire tied this thing. They hand tie the skirts on the jackhammers, but I've had a handful of them come loose. In fact, take a look at this one. This is one of my favorite colors. This is the green pumpkin shad, and an absolute killer trailer for this bait. This is the Strike King Z2 fluke style bait, and this is the Arkansas Shiner color, which perfectly matches the green pumpkin top and shad belly to this thing. But if you'll take note, right over here, you can see that this skirt is starting to fall apart. You see that strand of thread right here? This skirt is starting to come apart. And if I don't hand tie this thing almost immediately, tie over it or wire tie it, it's going to come off. And so just a little bit of a pet peeve. It has not been an issue on a majority of jackhammer chatterbaits that I've thrown. And to be honest, I throw these things quality and bladed jig. Daniel, I think you're right. It would pull better quality fish, but fewer bites. Yeah, definitely fewer bites because it's obnoxious underwater and it's displacing a tremendous amount of water. Um, yeah, I gave it a fair chance. Um, Maybe 40 or 50 casts. I spent a good 20 plus minutes with it in my hand in some prime spots and did not get any success on it. And then switched to a jackhammer, and I think I was throwing a straight white with a Z-Man goat trailer, and I did get a bump or two kind of right away. And more important than the bites are just the way that it feels and how you can work the bait. So if you slow roll this thing, it's running low in the water column. If you burn it fast, it's gonna ride high, and it's gonna pull like crazy. Even a heavy power rod is going to bend over um, while working this bait. So I don't know. the jury is out on this guy. For 11 or 12 bucks or whatever it retails at, my first instinct is to say that it's not worth it. Okay. It's a cool concept for sure, but the jackhammer is just so good and consistent. The blade is made from a different material. It's perfectly sized, and and the freedom of movement on it is remarkable. So the thump is, in my opinion, just right. Um, and I can get the jackhammers cheaper than most places by getting them at discount tackle. I can get them for less than 13 bucks. Um, Unless they've slightly raised their prices, but you can save 20% on Z-Man stuff most of the time on discount tackle. So you're I'm so sorry. Alan, you can get out of here if you want to, man. I'm so sorry. What's up, Matt? How are you doing, bro? Alan says I grew up listening to Bob Sager and the Rolling Stones. Sweet, man. That would be uh definitely a little bit before my time, but I hear you. Yeah, thanks, Frankie. This setup is not only good looking, just out of the water, but it performs really well. It's got just a little bit larger of a profile, but because this trailer is a Lastech in the Strike King Z2, it does fold over really well and allow fish to eat it. So a little bit bigger of a profile on it than, say, if you're using a Yamamoto Seiko, which you guys know by now is my absolute go-to trailer when it comes for the Jackhammer Chatterbait. And it's not just those three colors that I keep in stock at all times. I do really like that green pumpkin chartreuse color and throw it on the Beehide Delight. In fact, that's probably my favorite combo that I throw all together. Not trying to make things spill entirely on my desk, but I know I've got a pack of these sitting right here. So always have these on the ready. This color matches up just ideal with that Beehide Delight. So always have one of these rigged up. And yeah, the Yamamoto Seiko is really tough to beat. But you're right, Frankie. $12 is a little bit much for essentially an oversized original chatterbait. The blade is gigantic, and the action is good, but it's very aggressive. Not only does it pull hard, but when you start fishing it fast or at more of a typical pace, then it starts really getting wild. And maybe some people would call that a hunting action, but so if I'm throwing a jackhammer chatterbait, I want to be able to impart the hunting action on the bait. So there are a few different ways that I retrieve the jackhammer. First, if you're fishing it on bottom or close to the bottom, I'm going to let the thing fall all the way to the bottom. And sometimes I will fish it like a heavy lipless crankbait and literally just lift that rod maybe 6 inches to a foot to where that the bait is pulling up off of bottom. You can immediately feel the blade thumping, probably 5 to 10 turns, and it falls back to the bottom. So literally just a lift and drop, maybe 12 inches off of the bottom, and just fish this thing on bottom, or slow roll it along the bottom once it's bottom, and literally just kind of a medium speed retrieve. You can feel the blade thumping every single time. That is not the case with most Z-Man chatterbaits, where you will get that consistency and that thump out of the bait. So just a steady, slow roll along the bottom. But where I have the most success is fishing the bait in the middle, upper part of the water column. No, Ron. Dude, it's me. It's my internet. Can you guys hear me right now? Hey, me. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Ron Holly. Sean Z. Jackhammer, quick little tip. I've had the most success paralleling riprap banks and fishing it relatively fast. Either burning it right up in the shallows with an occasional pause, maybe every 10 cranks of the reel, or fishing maybe 5 or 10 feet off the bank where it's dropped off and letting it sink for a second or two and fishing it maybe 3 or 4 feet deep on a steady, medium fast retrieve. Daniel, I have too, man. Honestly, that is when I'm drinking this, is when I see it freeze up. So I'm right with you, man. But I will say the time that I've had the most success with the Jackhammer Chatterbait, especially this year, has been on a medium fast retrieve. And I've talked about how to fish a chatterbait a bunch on this channel, but the cool thing about the jackhammer is you can feel the vibration the entire way, no matter how slow or how fast you're fishing the bait. So what I like to do is parallel the bank and cast some 5 to 10 feet off the bank where it will drop from a couple feet to maybe 5 or 8 feet deep. And I will let it fall to 3 or 4 feet deep and then start a steady retrieve. If I'm using a 7-speed reel, it's going to be like this. If it's a 6-speed reel, it's going to be like this. Literally moving it along at a speed like this. Pretty fast, right? And every 5 to 10 cranks of the reel, so every few seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, bop, bop. And I will just speed it up so that that thing that is swimming straight along will just kind of dart or jump up. Um, and literally, it's like fish that are following it or fish that are watching it come by see it act a little funny and they get it. Um, by far, that is my best retrieve on a chatterbait, is a steady retrieve with an occasional erratic action built in. Now, if it's the dead of summer and you've got really thick grass, a great way to fish it, just like most people would associate with a typical chatterbait, is to throw it in the thick of grass, retrieve that thing where it's ticking over the top of grass, and it will get hung up from time to time. You rip that thing out of the grass and then keep retrieving it. You're not ripping it and letting it fall down. Rip it and swim it. And most of the time, as it rips out of the grass and then starts swimming, they grab it immediately. It's that pull out of the grass that gets their attention. It's usually then, if you kill it and let it fall, that they will leave it. They will not eat it. So it's crucial that when you're fishing it in grass, that it's a steady retrieve. And when you feel it get hung up, you rip it out and you keep retrieving. You do not fish it off of bottom when it's in grass. You don't constantly get it hung up and rip it out and let it get hung up. Rip it out, and let it get hung up. So literally just retrieve, 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 hung, rip it, rip it. And that will work too. Okay. But most of my success has been either tight to the bank and just a burning retrieve, maybe occasionally just popping the rod, or more likely a little bit off of the bank, still paralleling, and a steady medium fast retrieve with an occasional speed up. Um, and I say occasional, but I mean relatively frequently. So chatterbait is my number one bait. All right, guys, straight up, I always have one tied on, and 95% of the time for the last year or two, it's been a jackhammer chatterbait. There's a reason that I have um, a bunch of them ready to go. Bop, bop, bop. I've probably got 10 or more at all times that have not been fished, and right now I've got 4 still in the package. There's no reason these aren't sitting in that box, other than the fact that maybe I initially intended to give away more of these. I gave away one fire craw jackhammer earlier this spring, along with a fire craw. Maybe it was the cross eyes, or maybe it was a different chatterbait. But got a couple of bladed jigs in here that are still in their package, and that's rare for me. I don't like to keep a lot of hard baits, jigs, things like that in the package. It's really only soft plastics. I take everything out and load them into boxes straight up. For those 6 of you in here right now, I will mention this bait one time. I have mentioned it once or twice in the past, and I don't like to talk about it very frequently, but this is a cool bait that came about before the Rage Blade, before the Stealth Blade, and it's a different concept bladed jig that is not available in the US. These are hard to find, but it is a soft blade chatterbait. Okay. This one's still in the package for no real reason. I've got one that's out of the package that I do fish from time to time, and let me pull it out to show you. Now, it has a time and a place, but this is a totally unique design. And it's not like this design is patented. It's really Z-Man's direct blade to head connection that is the issue here. And so he's doing that. If you look, I will tell you that it's exactly. How did I already lose that Rage Blade? That Rage Blade was sitting right here earlier. And I think in picking up and putting down these swim baits, I misplaced it. But I'll use this as an example in showing you the reinforcement on the Stealth Blade jackhammer. Has that metal inside the clear plastic, okay? Not focusing great for you, but you can see what I'm talking about. This has the same concept in that it's got metal inside the blade for reinforcement, but this blade here is soft. Okay, so this is a silent chatterbait, completely silent, whereas the Stealth Blade is just more subtle. Okay, the Stealth Blade actually does make noise. It's just a lot quieter and a lot subtler than the jackhammer. The jackhammer actually sounds like a freaking jackhammer. That thing clacks really loud. The Stealth Blade, on the other hand, sounds like a no, I don't want to go to sound effects, but it is a quieter thud. The jackhammer is like it's a loud and this guy has almost no sound. It's just going to displace the water and create that vibration underwater. So um, this guy is a totally different concept of a bladed jig because it's a soft blade. So this is a JDM bait, only made and sold in Japan. It's got a little bit smaller of a hook. I want to say it's a 3/0 hook, very comparable in gauge of wire. It's got that double wire bait keeper, super, super high quality. But as you could see on that packaging that I showed you, this thing goes for 18 bucks. All right. And here's a quick little flash of what it's called. Keisu is a Japanese company through and through. They make a bladed jig trailer that goes really well with this bladed jig. And they make some good jerk baits and some other hard baits. But their stuff is really not available in the US. So I'm not gonna talk about that any longer. Mostly just because I'll go back to it. I throw the jackhammer 95% of the time. Straight up. I've got probably 25 of them in my box. And I won't stop buying them either, even though I've got multiple backups in every color that I use. And I use about a half a dozen different colors. So I use the Fire Craw, I use the Heights Hot Craw, both as red color patterns. I use the Bluegill. I use the Bee Heights Delight as a bluegill imitator. I use that green pumpkin shad. I use the pearl white. And I use like a white and chartreuse some of the time and a clear water shad some of the time. Yeah, Matt, kind of like a scrounger, just in a chatterbait. You're right. More true. Well, if you didn't take a sip of your drink, now's the time, guys. So a scrounger is going to actually roll side to side, and it's going to make the trailer do that. However, a soft blade chatterbait is going to do this, and it's going to push the water, and it's still going to swim true like a standard chatterbait will. So definitely a different action than you get out of a scrounger, but similar. And I like where your thought process is at, Matt. You're not wrong about that. Sean says, I use the Jackal Break Blade and the Megabass Robin Blade too. Interesting. Those are two baits that I do not have and do not throw and maybe should give a shot. One bait that I do sometimes throw or have started to throw is the Picasso Shock Blade, especially in their new version. This has titanium weed guards on it that are super strong, which makes this bait really weedless. And I find that it's got a really good startup and a consistent action, and this thing runs just a little bit lower in the water column. Now, I've also talked about the Thunder Cricket. Son of a biscuit. Come on, man. Yeah, Daniel, get your drink on, bro. What the? I don't know what's going on, guys. There's 7 people in here that are patient as all get out. Alan, that bluegill color is fire, no doubt about it. Um, in fact, both bluegill colors are. This is a standard bluegill. It is more like a watermelon candy orange belly, almost like an Alabama craw with a gold blade on it. However, the Bee Heights Delight color might just be my favorite. All right. And it's sad that I have to weed through a bunch of these, but here it is. Green pumpkin blade, green pumpkin top, chartreuse belly with a little bit of like shaddy clear skirting on the side. Bee Height Delight is the deal. Okay. If I could only pick one, that would probably be it. I do throw straight green pumpkin. Here's another one that I've had to retie the skirt onto. You can see that is very inconsistent in terms of that coloring. And the one that I've got rigged up right now that I've probably caught 50 or more fish on is the same way. I managed to preserve the skirt just a little bit better before I retied it. But oh, Tim Dunn, got to get more bourbon. Dude, I might need to go get more bourbon too. We just had 11 people in here. Now we got 8 people are dropping off. I might need to go get more bourbon too. Welcome to my drinking game, guys. This is brought to you by Comcast. None other than the shittiest internet. And like my neighbor's Wi-Fi, a bitch ass net. Okay? Super annoying. But yes, take a drink, guys. I know. I keep lagging out for 5 seconds every couple minutes. Super annoying. If you don't have a drink in your hand, maybe you should get one. This is the Heights Hot Craw color. Another green pumpkin red flake blade, green pumpkin red flake head. Dude, this is a super sleeper color. It's the equivalent of, say, Strike King's Falcon Lake Craw. Okay? In fact, I used to throw the Falcon Lake Craw Menace Grub as my go-to trailer on that. Have that box of plastics anywhere near me. Baba Booey. Check that out. I have a box. Again, this is the 3003 size Flambeau. That is filled with 6 different colors of the Strike King Rage Menace Grub. And look at that color pattern. Right there, it matches up flawlessly with that Heights Hot Craw color. Now, Z-Man has come out with their own version of that bait. Oh, and I've got it in the garage. Oh, no, I don't. I've got it right here. All right, so here it is. I mean, I hate to admit it because I do love Z-Man so much, but if we're talking about copycats, check this out. Side by side. The Menace Grub came first. The Goat came second. Turn that around. And here's that Heights Hot Craw from Z-Man. And here's that Falcon Lake Craw from Strike King. I say it. So yes, you're right, Sean. Everybody that's a fact in the industry. And if we're being honest, the goat does the same thing, and it's made from Elastec. So now I don't know about all that, Ron. It's not really different. It's pretty much the same design. The only differences are that it's not perfectly round. The goat is a little bit flatter, whereas the menace grub is almost perfectly round. So on the back of a chatterbait or a swim jig, I do kind of prefer the goat because it's going to run more true. It's not going to roll quite as much. So again, I prefer a bait that's going to run true. And then when I want it to act funny, I'm going to speed up the reel. I'm going to pop the rod. I'm going to do something funny to make it act funny when I want to. But yeah, the menace grub for years was like my go-to trailer on a chatterbait and on a swim jig. And I also would throw it on a Texas rig and on a wobblehead. I would throw it kind of for a lot of different things. The menace grub is a sweet bait. However, as Sean says, they get trashed pretty easily. So once you catch a few or a handful of fish on the bait, it will rip. It's just part of the, you're going to have to replace it. So that's the unfortunate reality. And the reason that I've gone to the goat is that I can catch 20, 30, 40 fish on this chatterbait rigged like this. I'm more likely to snag the bait and lose it than I am to have to change out the trailer. So how cool is that? That you can bring a couple of rigged chatterbaits with Elastec trailers and not need to bring backups. Now, I say that, and yet, when I was out a month ago, I was throwing the Razor Shads trailer, okay, on the back of a white jackhammer. Caught my best fish this year, about a 5-ish pounder. Might have been pushing 6, might have been a little bit smaller than 5. I don't know, but caught that fish, and then shortly thereafter got another bite, and very quickly realized that the tail was missing from my trailer. My Razor Shads was missing a tail, so that can happen. But in general, the bait is not going to tear up where the hook is coming out, and that is where you will lose the majority of your trailers and need to replace them. Okay. Ray in the house. What's up, dude? Tyler, do you double dipping on bourbon in Colorado's? No, man. I don't smoke weed anymore, Ray. I don't know if it's been that long since you've been on the streams, but I used to. If you guys have been following me for a couple of years, you would know that I used to, for sure. But ever since I had some seizures, and I've actually got legit epilepsy, my neurologists and doctors have suggested, as well as my wife being pretty insistent, that that I don't do that anymore. So I've gotten off that train after being on that train for probably 12 years or so. I did finally get off a year and a few months ago. So not my deal anymore, man. Not double dipping. Just got messed up hair. I was wearing a hat earlier today when I went fishing because it's cold outside. Dude, it's 35 degrees here right now in Colorado. Ron says, if this doesn't stop freezing, I'm going to need to type with my feet. If it does freeze again, I'm going to go pee. If it doesn't, you guys are going to have me as long as I can handle it, stomping my feet, because I kind of do have to pee already. The Depth's Little Rabbit looks pretty similar to the Z-Man one, but the Little Rabbit has more aggressive flange on the appendages. I have not heard of that bait, Matt, but I can guarantee that the Depth's bait has next to no durability. So Ray says, unless you leave it in the sun. That is a fact. If you leave a last tech in the sun, can be a problem. Not every time, but yeah, for sure. Matt says, do you prefer a cross style trailer or swim bait trailers for your swim jigs when you use them? To be honest, I prefer a cross style trailer most of the time. But if I'm throwing a lightweight swim jig and I'm throwing it high in the water column, I do prefer a swim bait. If I'm throwing a chatterbait or a swim jig that I want to run a little bit deeper, then I will throw a craw. And sometimes I will rig the craw vertically instead of horizontally. So it depends on the situation and the water clarity, as well as the bait fish that I'm trying to imitate. Sorry, Matt, to not be super direct, man. And Tim says, do you add weight to the chatterbait to offset the floating Z-Man trailer? No, I don't. I just adjust my retrieve accordingly. The floating Z-Man trailer does not cause a lot of difference in action. So I have mostly just gotten accustomed to it. But in terms of weight, you're going to get about the same. So it's not going to cause the bait to rise much more. It's the blade configuration, it's the material of the blade and where it's bent and how much it's bent. And also how fast you retrieve the bait that will actually cause the bait to rise more. So I hope that makes sense. But no, when I'm throwing a Z-Man Elastec trailer on the back of a chatterbait, I still prefer a 3/8 ounce to a half ounce most of the time, unless I'm, say, fishing in 5 to 10 feet of water. But if I'm fishing anywhere in that 1 to 8 feet of water, I do prefer a 3/8 with the same retrieves that I already talked about earlier. Okay. Ron says, you have a zillion in lures and no scale. I do have a scale. What are you talking about? Oh, no, I did not have a scale on me that night. I do have 2 scales. But that night that I was out, I did not even have my backpack. I brought my hemostats in my pocket. I was wearing gloves, fingerless gloves, because it was cold outside. This was just 3 weeks ago during the full moon, and I brought 2 rods with me, and I did not expect to catch a giant fish at all. So yeah, that's just kind of how it went. But I've got pictures to prove it. I've just got experience. I caught a 4.5 pounder in July, and it did not feel as big as this one. But sometimes you never know. So I hear you, man. Alan says, I caught my PB bass on a 6 cents clout wacky rig this year. Sweet, dude. The clout is a great bait. I would put it up there in, say, my top 5 stick baits, wacky rig baits, right about there. It's a good bait. Daniel says it's in the 80s in Kentucky today. For the next few days, it's going to be cooler, though. Ray says, I wish they made more dark blades on the different colors. Well, they do in the Jackhammer, just not in a lot of the cheaper chatterbaits. So that's the issue that you run into, right? Black and Blue has a black blade. Heights Hot Craw has a green pumpkin blade. Green Pumpkin and B Heights Delight have green pumpkin blades. Green Pumpkin Shad has a green pumpkin blade. It's really only the shad or silvery color patterns. This is white. This is green shad, and then I think Clearwater shad, and maybe a few others have silver, and then that bluegill has a gold blade. But Jackhammer is going to be what you hear me talking about, man. The rabbit is actually pretty tough compared to a depths cover scat, which tears usually after one fish, unless you get lucky. Reason you definitely need to mend it. Yeah, that's brutal. Same with the geek rack bellows gill. You really need the right kind of hook. In fact, I think if you use a screw lock hook um, made by Gamakatsu or owner, that will greatly extend the life of the bait that you're using. So if it's a bait that you're Texas rigging, whether it's weightless or with a weight, I would highly recommend using a screw lock so that you don't rip the nose out of that bait. And a lot of these baits are reversible, if you will, if you're not using a two-tone color pattern. Damn it, Tim. When did drinkity drink? What? When? I didn't know that I tripped out, man. Sorry about that. Matt says, I always keep a good scale on me. Whatever, man. There was one time, one night, and I'm not always expecting to catch my PB, but maybe I should be. I hear you. Sean says, I only throw a half ounce in current. Yeah, that's a different ball game altogether. In current, I will throw heavier. Um, and depending on how I'm retrieving the bait, if I want it on bottom, I'll even throw a 3/4 ounce. Um, but usually, if I'm fishing moving water, I am going to go to a half ounce. Um, in fact, if I'm fishing, um, that 5 to 10 foot of water, and I want to retrieve the bait like normal, I will fish a half ounce. So I do still have a decent amount of half ounce jackhammers in here. They're not all 3/8, if we're being honest. Um, this is again that type of situation where I probably throw the 3/8 75% of the time, because I'm typically fishing skinny water. I'm fishing ponds and lakes and fishing a chatterbait around shallow water or submergent grass. So I don't need it to go super deep. Matt says I caught my PB on a Megabass Edo Shiner from Megabass, 6.8 pounds in the beginning of March. Thought I hooked a stump until it started moving to the right. That is sick. The Edo Shiner is one of the few jerk baits I don't have from Megabass. I need to make a point to get it. Now, tell me, Matt, why do you use that bait? When and why over, say, the the X80 Trick Darter or the Vision 110, um, say the Vision 110 Junior, right? Because doesn't the Shiner measure just a little bit smaller than the 110? Or is it the same size and it just has a more aggressive darting action where you can hit it harder? What's to know about the Edo Shiner, and why should we all have one? And Matt says, yeah, he uses a screw eye for the cover scat. Definitely helps for sure. Got to know that trick, man. Ron is always expecting to catch his PB. Got to have a scale, because if you're bassless, you never know. Once you catch a bass, you got to weigh it. Doesn't matter how much it is. Who cares? If it's 6 ounces or 6 pounds, it needs to be weighed because it's a PB. So, Ron Hawley, there's no excuses for not having a scale. In fact, if you don't have a scale, I will send you my old one. you let me know. You need a scale. Yeah, Sean, I know it has a slightly different action. It's got more erratic action and is not quite as subtle. But when and where would we use the Ito Shiner over the 110? Or over the trick, the X80 trick darter, right? The X80 is a smaller bait, right? And so if you're trying to imitate smaller bait, but you still want an aggressive action, the X80 is a good route to go. Of course, I've got the Great Hunting Yow. Got the Great Hunting series attached to that hook right now. I've got the 110 Junior sitting right here. I've got really all of the Megabass jerk baits for the most part sitting right in front of me, but I don't have any of the Ito Shiners. So Sean says, when the fish are more aggressive, pre-spawn up to spawn, basically. That's a good point. Good point for sure. Thank you for that. Matt says, I use the Ito Shiner more than the Vision 110 because the Shiner has a bigger profile. It's fatter, right? But when you jerk it, it has a wider slashing action. Yep. When you pause it, it quivers as it starts to suspend. I don't know that I prefer that action necessarily, but I agree that it has a different profile and a wider, more aggressive action. So there you go. Hey, Ron, hit me up after this stream. I'll send you my old scale. It's not one that is the best in the world, but it works. It does its job. It was probably 10 or 20 bucks, but I use my Rapala scale now. And so I don't really have a need for two scales, and you might as well get a scale. Now, it might not have fish grips on it like my Rapala scale does. So you might have to, put the deal under the fish's gills, which is unfortunate, but it's not going to damage or really hurt the fish too much. So hit me up, Ron. I'll send it to you. Matt says, I think the Ito shines when the water is cold in the summer. Don't have much luck in 50-degree water or under, but 60, it's killer. You get that secondary action with the quiver, and I think that definitely helps when it's cold. When you pause the bait, it's still shimmying a bit, but not too much where that causes the fish to second guess. Interesting. That sounds a little bit contradictory to me because usually that wiggle or shimmy in a jerk bait is something that I second guess and assume that fish also second guess. So I want more of a crisp action. When I'm hitting a jerk bait, I want it to dart and then kind of stop. I don't want it to drag. I don't want it to swim. And when you say quiver, I kind of assume that means swim a little bit. But I believe you in that it's not. And Sean says another sleeper is the Megabass Flap Slap. That's one that I'm not familiar with, but that I perhaps ought to look into. Tim says hook under the gill plate, doesn't touch the tender gill parts. Yeah, well that's what I'm talking about. I don't like doing that. I don't like getting too close for comfort. I prefer to clip them on the lips, right? If you have to, you close their eyes, make sure that they're calming down, and you get a good weight on them. But if you don't have that grip, then yeah, you got to hook them under the gill plate, just like you said. So I hear you. So Matt and Sean geeking out about Megabass. The flap slaps are great, and Matt uses them mainly near current. And none of us know about the flap slap. Speaking of Megabass jerkbaits, here's the giant Kanata. I might be throwing that sometime soon. And here's the standard 110. This is one that maybe I need to be sending to Debo. You know, if you guys watched me on Debo's stream, he admitted that he has 0 Megabass Vision 110s. And in my opinion, that's probably a mistake. He needs to have 1 or 2 or more of these in his arsenal. There is definitely a time and a place. And obviously, the end of fall through the beginning of spring are when this bait is going to shine, and you want a jerkbait to sit for a little bit longer. But the Vision 110 is still known as the standard in suspending jerkbaits industry wide. So, of course, there are niche baits for every single thing. Whether you're downsizing or you want a slightly more aggressive action, you want it to roll more, flash more, whatever. But the Vision 110 is the deal, and Debo doesn't have any. No, I know that, Sean, but because I also bank fish a lot and I have a bunch of these and am not as scared to lose them, um, I'm thinking about giving him one, if not 2. Ray, am I really am I tweaking out? Tim says I like to pop a jerk bait when I stop the retrieve, as it will often make the bait do a complete 180 when triggering a strike. Interesting. Guys, I got to pee. I've been on here for an hour. It's 11:08 my time, but I'm down to hang out a little bit longer. Why don't you guys talk amongst yourselves, come up with a question or two to ask? I'm going to get a couple ice cubes and a little bit more bourbon, and I'll be back in 90 seconds. Okay? Let's keep the conversation going. All right. Well, my son is awake for God knows why. Not wide awake, but he's making some noise. So I'm probably gonna need to leave sooner than later, just in case he starts freaking out. But I did feed him before I hopped on here, you know, 2 hours ago. So I don't quite understand it. Yeah, Ray, you might be right, dude. Once you say, he's got 120,000 subscribers on YouTube, right? Devin does. He says he's got no Vision 110s. And I then, while streaming with him, say, hey, you know what? As a little thank you and a little donation to the stream instead of money, I want to send you a Vision 110 jerkbait. He says, oh, no, no, don't do that. And he genuinely means it. But I would not be surprised whatsoever if he did receive a couple of those baits after. So, yep. And Tim says he doesn't own any because he loses baits so easily. Ooh, a little spicier because this is fresh on ice right now. Woo wee. Again, this is that Starlight. Um, the sip is bananas. That barrel pick that my brother and his buddy did from Beneath the Char. If you guys don't follow them on Instagram, and yeah, pretty sweet bottle, good pour, good selection by them. So it is like 112 proof. Is relatively strong, spicy bourbon, but I like that. I just prefer it a little bit cold in temperature or a little bit watered down. Whichever is fine for me, but I just put it on 2 cubes of ice and it's neither right now, so going down hot. Uh Sean says he's got 2 Plano 3700 size boxes full of 110s. Whoa, dude. And I thought I had a reasonable amount of 110s. And honestly, I've only got 2 rows full of 13700 size box. I probably have 20, maybe a little bit more than 20. Um, 25 to 30 between the 110s, the 110 plus ones, the 110 juniors. But then I've also got the trick darters and the Kanadas and a few others. So yeah, I get it, but I definitely don't have as much money as you in those baits. So good for you, Sean. Really stocking up. Alan says he fishes from a boat a lot. And Matt says I don't lose many baits anymore. To be honest, once I figured out the water I was fishing, literally know all the pockets or the depth. I just fish baits that run about that depth or shorter and heavier line. Yeah. Well, good for you, man. Keeping that bait higher in the water column, just being super aware of where you are in the water. That is smart. No doubt about it. Wow, you guys are really chatting amongst yourselves. I appreciate that. Good for you guys. Sean's got the entire run of 110s. Juniors plus ones, plus twos, silence. Yeah, no, me too, man. Honestly. Uh, I just don't have probably as many color patterns or as many duplicates as you, right? Uh, I pretty much only carry the Matt Shad, the Gigi Perch. Oh, I've got the Matt Perch. I've got the Edo Tennessee Shad. And then I've got like the Table Rock, the Megabass Sexy Shad, the Pro Blue, and then some variation of Pearl or Pearl Orange Belly, and maybe like an Elegy Bone color pattern. Now, I don't have all of those in every version, right? But like these guys right here, the first three that I grabbed are all silent. And so this is the Edo Tennessee Shad. This is that Gigi Perch. And then the Matt Shad. So I've got the regular, the silent, the juniors, the plus ones, and a couple of junior plus ones as well. And Matt's got the high floats, the Kanadas, the X80s, the Edos. He says Ebos, but I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, LBOs. Yeah, sorry, man. My bad. I don't have the LBOs or the high floats. Sean says, the sad part is I have just as many Lucky Craft Pointer 78s and 100s. Me too, man. I hate to keep getting this box down, but this entire row is 100s and some 78s, and then I've got another box full of like 78s. So, dude, you've got quite the collection, Sean. I hate to say I'm jealous because I'm not really. I feel like I've got a good collection going, but good to know that I'm not alone, right? Robin Allen, what's up? The name of this bourbon, this is from Starlight Distillery. So this was a single barrel pick by my brother and his buddy who have a podcast called Beneath the Char. If you're a bourbon fan and you like anything about bourbon, especially heritage and stories and getting to know the master distillers or the history behind some of the biggest names in bourbon, you should check out this podcast. It's called Beneath the Char. My brother and his best buddy run it. They've done like 55 episodes now. It's pretty much all audio stuff on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, but they do have an Instagram page where sometimes they will go live, but pretty much every day they will post a photo, and it's an awesome platform. Cool little concept that they're doing. So, in the last year or so, they've gotten into selecting their own barrels from big name distilleries around the country. And I think this is probably their fifth or sixth single barrel pick that they've done. And they're doing some cool stuff. Like, let me show you a picture of what the label looks like. It's a play on words of the old Gwen Stefani song. And so it says, "This sip is bananas." My brother has a buddy that is big into graphic design, and I wish I had a picture of the back of the label to show you, but Yeah, anyway, it's a 4.5 year, 112 proof bourbon. And it's a collaboration between Beneath the Char and a liquor store out in on the East Coast. So Ray says, "Don't drink later. All get out of here, Ray. Come on, man. I'm not gonna keep talking about it, but don't leave because I'm talking about bourbon for a minute, man." You can keep talking about kayak fishing all you want, dude. Belat was even pro, and now they're major players in bass fishing. Is that a fact? Brian Latimer was a professional saltwater angler before he went into bass fishing. Is that true? And Ray, I know that you're sober, but I'm not talking about bourbon to offend you. You know, it's a passion of my brother's, just like bass fishing is ours. And Robin in here said that it's his first time watching, and and that he was curious about what bourbon I'm drinking. So I thought I would give him a little info and tell him to check out my brother's podcast. That's all. I congratulate you on your sobriety. Honestly, uh, as I told you earlier, I have quit smoking weed and am dead serious about that. I live in Colorado, in the mecca of marijuana. Right? Theoretically, I should have invested in a dispensary or a grow facility because it's just a great business model here. But the reality is, I can't, I shouldn't, and I won't do that any longer. So we all have kind of our own vices. Fishing is the main one for all of us. That's why we're in here. So to each his own. Sean's pouring. Uh, what did Ron say recently? Ron said, "I emptied the fridge of beer, and he just found another bottle." So some people are drinking, some people aren't. Not a big deal if you're not. So Ray, don't leave, man, if you haven't already. Matt says it's not supposed or hasn't started raining yet, but it's supposed to here tomorrow. Elastics have been around in saltwater, soft plastics before Z-Man started making their plastic, I think. Good point, Matt. Yeah, I think that's where Z-Man got the inspiration. Belat helped blow up Z-Man. Um, yeah, I mean, Belat has been a big part of Z-Man. He's been a big sponsored angler of Z-Man for a long time, and he's great. I love Brian Latimer. I love Z-Man. Um, Belat is kind of a down to earth guy. He's he's very practical, and I love how not only does he think outside the box, but he does things his own way. Uh, he's a very good representative of Z-Man, and I think they're lucky to have him, and vice versa. So you're right that Elastec baits tend to do better in the salt, and the reason for that is their durability. The fact that most of those fish have really aggressive teeth and can shred plastic baits quickly, but it has translated to freshwater very, very well over the last, I don't know, decade or more. And I don't blame Z-Man for coming out with dozens of different shapes, um, since really striking it big with the Finesse TRD. It's pretty insane to think how far they've come in that initially they were really just a small company, and then a couple of good moves that made all the difference. You know, getting on board with Ned Cahey, who was using the Zinkers, right? Just a Senko style salted soft plastic bait and salted Elastec bait, I should say. It does sink. He was cutting it in half and using that on a mushroom style jig head and catching the snot out of fish, catching, over 100 fish per bait. Worked with Z-Man to help develop the Finesse TRD, which is saltless and floats better. Suits the Ned rig a little bit better in the way that it falls, the way that it stands up, fishes, etc. Uh, in addition to the fact that Z-Man acquired the rights and the patent for the chatterbait, um, they kind of timed everything just right, say 10-ish years ago. Um, as bass fishing started blowing up, so did these techniques of the chatterbait and the Ned rig. So Z-Man is right there, and yeah, I love them, and I don't blame any of you guys who do either. Ray says yes, like the bass kayak explosion. I met them when they were first starting up. They were running Carolina and Florida coast, pushing their products. Yeah, I hear you. Um, yeah, kayak fishing has really blown up over the last decade too. That was not really something that even was a thing 10 years ago. And now there's a couple professional circuits for kayak bass fishing. Pretty cool deal. Not only are a lot of people fishing out of kayaks, but there are ways to win a lot of money by fishing professionally out of a kayak instead of a boat. So pretty sweet. Really, Ray? They'd give baits out for free. That's pretty sweet. Definitely smart. Not gonna lie, their stuff is good. I definitely recommend their plastics to young people or people starting out. Won't break the bank or work, and they work great. Oh, get out of here, Matthew. Young people or people starting out. I think Z-Man stuff is underrated. I think a Laztec is a unique plastic that if you look at how the market has gone just in the last year with Savage Gear, Molix, Spro, and a couple of other companies all making their own variation of a Laztec. Um, dude, it's the deal. It's not about the fact that it's cost effective or just durable. Um, People are recognizing that there is a time and a place, not just a market, a consumer that is budget conscious or doesn't like to run through a lot of plastics, but that there is a time when fish will eat a buoyant and more durable soft plastic that has that stretchy high float action to it, uh, more than others. So other companies have found out how to put scent in them. All three of the ones I just mentioned, right? Uh, from Spro being the newest to Molix to Savage Gear, they've all put scent in their Duratech, Duratough, whatever it is that they're calling it. Um, and you're seeing more and more baits on the market that are that way. So Sean says, I'm too clumsy to be in a yak. I'd be in the water more than in the boat. That's hilarious. And Daniel says, I've never thrown a Ned rig. Finesse just doesn't appeal to me. Interesting, dude. I agree that finesse doesn't appeal to me either. I don't throw finesse stuff that often, but there is definitely a time and a place. And if you're fishing somewhere that is a pressured body of water or where you're around a very high percentage area, let's say you go to the same body of water and fish the same spot frequently, um, you got to be throwing finesse, whether it's a Ned rig, a shaky head, a Nico rig, or a drop shot. Doesn't matter to me. But if you're fishing close to the bottom with something that's either a dead sticking or subtle action type of bait, you got to have it. Okay. Just saying. And races, I told you the Z Man story in 2019, homie. Maybe you're right, dude. I don't know. And yeah, they're difficult to rig for sure. And if you forget them in the sun, it's a mistake. I've done that with a handful of bags of Z Man soft plastics, and it's annoying because they just all melt together or they warp and completely change shape and are essentially unusable no matter what. So, yeah, that's a frustration for sure. Matt says there were swim bait makers all gathering. They were giving out expensive baits to young kids for free, which is pretty cool to see. That is baller. And Matt says I definitely recommend Z-Man over Guggen to anyone. Period. No hate towards Guggen, but you're gonna go through money with their plastics. Well, comparing them to Guggen suggests to me that you're hating on Z-Man just a little bit, if we're being honest. But you're right about that. Um, yeah, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole too much right now. Sean says Z-Man is definitely best bang for the buck, cost wise. I use them a lot for jig trailers on my micro jigs. Absolutely. Yep. Especially with some of the shapes that they've come out with as of late, right? So, you know, the TRD craws are a super realistic high float soft plastic. The baby goat is a new one, and just like I showed you, can even go on the back of a small quarter ounce swim jig or something like that. The TRD hogs, um, the TRD bugs is super underrated. I talked about that on my last live stream. Um, yeah, Z-Man, as I mentioned 10 minutes ago, has come out with so many different shapes that it no longer just applies to saltwater anglers, right? Before it was like, oh, yeah, let's make shrimp style baits, the crusties, the crabs. Um, it was really like kind of out there, very saltwater driven. They would make some swim baits, but then they would also make a lot of like crabs, craws, fleas, um, leeches, things like that that were a lot more saltwater driven. And over the last 10 years, they've really gone freshwater. Um, and I got a lot of respect for that for sure. Matt, yeah, even when you think you're not hating on them, you are. I'm saying Z Man is definitely better. I even use some of their stuff. I even use some of their stuff. Has anyone tried that Nico brand? Yes. Uh, I have. I've only got a couple of their baits right now. Um, I've got the tadpole and the octopus. They're cool baits. Uh, but if we're being honest, it's got scent in it, and they've got some unique shapes. But kind of like when Z-Man got started, they are a saltwater driven company. Okay. So they've got some cool shapes that range from octopus to crab to more traditional freshwater worms and swim baits. But if we're being honest, Scent is about all that they have going for them. Shapes to me are not all that innovative these days. So they have a Ned bait, they have a craw bait that's somewhere between the TRD craws and the pro craws. They have a swim bait, which is more of like a Kitech style swim bait than, say, a Z-Man Diesel Minnows. Um, but the thing about Nico is that their baits are really expensive. And I guess that's because they're made in Japan, but most of us would prefer that the baits are made in the USA, just like Z-Man. And Z-Man includes more in their packages and they charge less. So I hate to say it, but even though most Z-Man plastics are not scented, I do and would prefer them over Nico. And that's just me. Justin, no diggity. What's up, bro? Ron says, I don't know. They all last and last and last for me because he's not using any of his baits. Dude is collecting like a madman, shopping left and right, planning, and not fishing. Ron, you got to get out there, bro. The second that you get out there, you got to get out there. You know what I'm saying? And Ray says he's got quite a few packs of the razor shads. Yeah. Don't throw. I mean, honestly, I catch them great on both. As I said, the Zako is probably my number one trailer. Right? I've got like all my bases covered from white, black and blue, Beehite Delight, white and chartreuse. But that said, I still carry black and blue, white, the deal, more bait fish style patterns in the razor shads. And I do use them and have a lot of success on them. I also will mix it up. Like this is the Strike King Z2, which is their fluke style bait, which is essentially the same thing as what is Z-Man called? The jerk shads. Maybe they have two different names for their fluke style bait, but the Strike King Z2 just has a little bit of salt in it where the Z-Man Elastec baits do not. Now, this is a Strike King bait, but it's made from Elastec and made by Z-Man. Just has a slightly higher salt content in it, and I like it better as a fluke. I like it better as a trailer, and I tend to use it more than I do. Okay, the streaks is what it's called. Streaks and the jerk shads. Justin's got his truck running. You about to go tear it up mudding and ruin that engine. I hear you, man. Sean says he loves to try new tackle. Just the challenge of catching fish on them is fun to me. Me too, man. That's what I'm all about. I've got new tackle everywhere. And I can't help it. I love it. I freaking love it. Ron Hawley loves to talk about the chase baits. And I'm sorry that last time you brought up chase baits, Ron, that I got it all mixed up. I know that this is the love bug, not the mud bug. You were talking about the freaking crawfish. That's my bad, man. Justin went out a few weeks ago and threw the net out there. Caught probably 10 in the last hour he was out there on the Z-Man Neds. Molting craw color. Sick, dude. That's awesome. That is great to hear. It can be a very productive bait. especially if you are working it in high percentage areas and you're working the bait slow. Daniel says, you know what? I did do some finesse fishing. Only problem was my bait was big and the fish was small. Finesse, lol, using 10-inch old monster worms and got 6-inch bass. That will happen for sure. I throw big worms too and catch dinks. Uh, but that's a reality is that you should throw big worms year round. That said, you can also throw smaller worms. A standard trick worm um, will probably catch you small and big fish just as well, if not better, than a 10-inch curltail worm. So, yeah, I mean, I would throw a straight tail worm more frequently if I'm going finesse. What did Sean say? Dude, you've been buying like a straight addict, like a madman as of late. Um, are you ever going to stop? Not my place to tell you that you should stop. I'm just asking, do you see an end in sight or are you just straight up addicted right now and can't stop, won't stop? Yes, Ron, you're right. The diesel minnows is one soft plastic swim bait that does not interfere with the chatterbait or vice versa. The blade of the chatterbait, the displacement of the water, does not interfere with the paddle tail of the diesel minnow swim bait. There are not many paddle tail swim baits on the market that are that way. Okay. Most of them have a pretty wide kick to them. And as they're kicking with the chatterbait blade moving the water, that tail will raise up and just start to kind of wag uncontrollably. Where normally it would be kicking like this, and then it just starts kind of doing this, acting funny. But the diesel minnows will continue to kick behind the blade of a chatterbait. Um, it's one of the few that will do an effective job. So great bait behind a chatterbait, and I'm pretty sure maybe I moved them from here, and all I carry right now are the goat, the turbo craws, and the razor shads. But I've got a whole bunch of diesel minnows right here. Green pumpkin, black and blue, hot snakes, 4-inch, 5-inch. Yeah, Ray's not throwing big swim baits or hard body swim baits. No interest for him. Cool baits though. Yeah, they're pricey, man, right? That's the main downside with them, you know? These are affordable multi-jointed hard swim baits, right? This guy is the Spro BBZ1 in the 6-inch. Very affordable, very good bait. 2 joints. Gamakatsu stock hooks on it. Great action, super slow sink. And this thing costs like 20 to 25 bucks. This guy is the newer Spro Arashi swimmer. A little bit bigger at 7 inches instead of 6. A little bit narrower if we're looking at it. Also 2 joints, 3 pieces. Also has great hardware on it. This guy's got rotating hook hangers, rotating line tie, super high quality bait, and yet it's affordable. Retails at 37 bucks, something like that. Great deals on those baits, but still, we're talking 25, 35, $40 on a single bait that you might hang up on a cast. I mean, it's just part of the game. It's unfortunate, right? Matt says, I need to get back onto swim jig fishing. I stopped for a couple months because the bite just wasn't there. And I was landing 5 to 7 fish every time I was going out. Well, that's a good reason for not throwing the swim jig, right? Yeah, swim jig is just a more subtle version of a chatterbait. You're absolutely right, Sean. Almost every swim jig has a vertical line tie and comes through grass extremely well. So fishing it high in the water column or in and around, over the top of, or through grass is a great way to fish a swim jig, no doubt. Matt says, I'm done for the moment. I have my last amount of baits coming in the next week and UFO next month. That's it. Got the ones I wanted, so next year I'm good. Yeah, we'll see about that, Matt. And Sean is absolutely right. With a traditional paddle tail swim bait, one hack that you can use is by turning it upside down or removing the tail. You can make that bait work just fine as a chatterbait trailer without interfering with or causing it to act funny behind a chatterbait. So, rigging a Kitech style bait upside down on a chatterbait will work just fine as a trailer. Absolutely right. Ray says I stopped buying baits. All I do is my 6 cent subscription, and that's single 110 last week. No way, Ray. Good for you and being disciplined, man. Well, maybe I ought to send you a little care package then. Little subscription box. Well, not subscription, not a regular monthly thing, but I could probably throw you a couple things, man. We should talk offline about the bodies of water that you're fishing because I know you said you do both bank and boat fishing, but I'd love to know what I could help you out with, dude. Sean says point the tails up instead of down. Yep, you're right. No, that's exactly. I know what you're talking about, dude. So instead of a paddle tail swim bait like so, you literally just rig it upside down. So that tail is pointed up instead of down. Okay. Uh, like so, it's going to kick pretty aggressively. Upside down, it's going to kick a lot more subtle. So, like regular, it's going to kick really wide, and upside down, it's going to kick quite a bit more subtle and more consistently, too. So, if you rig a paddle tail swim bait like a Rage Swimmer or a Kitech, anything like that, upside down, it's an awesome chatterbait trailer. If you still want it to have some kick. Otherwise, what I do is literally just snip the tail off right at the tail. I will even leave this section of flat. And then essentially what you get is a hog farmer spunk shad instead of a swim bait, right? Which is a great chatterbait trailer. Justin says, whoop. I just missed a couple of things. Caught my PB on a Zoom trick worm on a shaky head, green pumpkin chartreuse earlier this year as it hit the bottom. 3.3 pounder, not big, but I'm grateful for it. Yeah, dude, that's sweet. Right as it hit the bottom, huh? That means as it was falling and waving down, that bass just followed it, hit the bottom, whoosh, gulped it. That's sick. Doesn't matter if your PB is a 3.3, man. Yeah, Matt, we know you got a whole bunch of swim baits coming that maybe you've already bought or are about to buy. No big deal. Yeah, I'm not trying to guilt trip you here. We're all addicts, right? I just placed another order the other day. I don't even remember where from. Tackle Direct. I couldn't help but buy some of those new chick magnets from Strike King, the flat-sided crankbaits that have a rattle in them, but are supposed to act like a balsa flat-sided crank. Dude, I bought a few of them and a couple of other things too. So I'm also considering buying more of the Berkeley Maxent stuff from Susquehanna Fishing Tackle, and for no real reason, right? I mean, I've got this entire box that I just opened for you guys a week ago. Um, I rigged this up. I fished it a little bit this past week, and I didn't even catch a fish on it, but I've had such great confidence in Berkeley Maxent products that I almost can't help but stock up a little bit more while they're still difficult to get a hold of. Look at how awesome of a pairing this freaking thing is. This is a football head made by Picasso. It's got a recessed head on it that is kind of, the line tie is tucked into the head. It's got a Gamakatsu light wire hook on it, and this Berkeley Maxent chigger craw in the blue craw. And I've added a 6 cent skirt to it that is also blue craw. I mean, look at how well that matches. It's almost lost its scent. Almost. Not quite, but I've had that thing rigged up for like a week. Daniel says, has anyone tried any of the cheap off-brand swim baits on Amazon? No. Sorry, I'm not trying to be rude about it. I've tried like the Bass Pro swim baits and the Eco Pro tungsten. That brand, Eco Pro, makes a shad style, Kitech style swim bait. And then obviously I've tried, you know, everything under the sun. I've got the Spark Shads, the Jackal uh, Rhythm Waves, the 6 Cents Divine, the 6 Cents Whales. Whoops. There goes the Divines. I'll have to track those down later. And the Strike King Rage Swimmers. But no, Amazon swim baits? I don't think so, man. You talking paddle tails or something else? And I'm with you, Ray. I like to go as light as I can on weights as well, dude. Sean says, buy a good plug knocker if you're going to throw big hard body swim baits. Yeah, that's a good point. Good recommendation for sure. Sean says, you don't have to spend 200 on a swim bait to catch fish. One of my most successful glides is 20 bucks. Are you talking about the S Waver? We're talking about the Shine Glide. What you talking about? The I'm a Glide Fluke. Cool. It's one that I don't have. Ray says, I'll buy a box from you, Tyler. How about that? You put together a box, think it has bass catchers in it, and I'll buy it and fish it and report my progress. Yeah, we could talk about that. Odds are I'll put together a box, um, pretend like I'm going to charge you, and then I'll send it to you. Okay? How about that? Or if you insist, then fine. You can throw me some money for it. But yeah, I'll put some stuff together. Let's just have a back and forth about what might work well in your bodies of water. That's ridiculous, Justin. People are saying you need $300 because the cheaper ones don't work. That's insane. Yeah, I lost an S Waver 168 the other day in that light trout color. Got it snagged and could not get it back. Broke it off. So I didn't feel like going swimming for it. You know, you win some, you lose some. It is a good bait, but already I'm finding that I like a few other baits better than the S Waver. And that's just me. Yeah, Ray, I think you're right that Justin and the rest of us should stay away from those super elitist guys who say that you absolutely need to be spending an insane amount of money on swim baits because the reality is that's not true. Matt says ice slides and Gan crafts are great beginner baits. ABT glide or hardcore ninja glide, pistol Pete's. Yeah, G Rat makes some really good baits. The pistol Pete and the bigger one. What the hell is that? I don't know about the hardcore ninja. I've only got uh their lipped bait. Maybe that's the one that you're talking about. Matt, you're scared of throwing your expensive baits? You got so many of them, man. And I guess you should be wearing your board shorts to the water every time you go fishing. Just be ready to hop in and go catch your own baits if you cast them off or if you hang them up. I mean, that's just a reality, right? Yeah, Matt, we've talked about the black market before. Super annoying. I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole right now and talking about reselling baits for much more than they're worth or than they retail for. That kind of chaps my ass, you know. The sneaky Pete, you're right, Sean. Thank you. Pistol Pete's the smaller one. The sneaky Pete's the older one, the bigger one. Yep. No, the pistol's the smaller. The sneaky's the larger. I'll tell you that much. I know that. All right. Here's the sneaky. The sneaky Pete, in my opinion, has a little bit better of an action than the S Waver 168. It definitely has a freer range of movement. It's got a wider joint. You know, a lot of people will sand down the joint on the S Waver 168, right? Like, take a look at this guy. So these are, I've got 4 budget glide baits for you right here. Here's the S Waver 168. That's how much it bends over. Here's the Sneaky Pete before it touches. Now, if I compare the S Waver to the Shine Glide, this is the Savage Gear Shine Glide. And if I compare the S Waver to the Arashi Glide, the Arashi Glide is kind of just right in terms of what most people would try to achieve when shaving down an S Waver. Um, and for me, the most annoying part was I had just changed out the hooks on that S Waver. Uh, but that's not that big of a deal. The Sneaky Pete is the 7.5-inch version. The Pistol Pete is like the 5.5 or 5 3/4, whatever it is. Daniel asks, Matthew, do you have a manifold? Dude, Matt, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. That's a good idea, Ron. I think most of us would join Fishing Lures and Anonymous. If you could spell anonymous right, if you were a little less drunk. Just kidding. We're all drunk, except for you and Ray. Nobody's drunk. Chill out. But yeah, Fishing Lures Anonymous, no doubt about it. We all have a problem here. That is a fact. I don't want to admit how much money I got put into fishing gear, fishing lures specifically. I probably could and should trade lures for gear like rods and reels at some point, but I won't. I love lures too much. It's just the reality of it. So that's hilarious that you mentioned that, though. Sean says, I only have a few high dollar swim baits. The Depths 250, Gancraft Magnum. Yep, those are expensive baits, no doubt. FOM Glide, says Matt. They're sweet, such a nice size. Not big at all. 2 ounces, handmade. Paint jobs are sweet. They're actually sweet for smallies, but work great for largies. And Ray says, I mainly fish reservoirs, mostly deep and clear, heavily pressured, 44 to 70 boats per tournament twice a week. I don't fish tournaments, but they make tackle choice difficult at times. Interesting. That is what we should talk about more offline, Ray. Guys, it is crazy late. I love how active you 4, 5, 6 guys are right now. This is fun. And I hope we can do it again very soon, if not tomorrow night. If you guys don't have anything going on tomorrow night, same time, I will be here. Not this late. It's midnight my time, 2 o'clock Eastern right now. So I will be on most likely 3 hours ago tomorrow night. Say 21 hours from now. Call it 9 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 8 p.m. Western, 11 p.m. Eastern, and we will call it good. So, guys, thank you so much. Will Perriman in the house. What's up, dude? Just keep in mind, set your clock for tomorrow night at about that time. It will be a roughly 11 o'clock your time. Dude, I can't believe you're up at 2 a.m. right now. Will Perriman, what are you doing? Don't you live on the East Coast? How are you awake right now? Daniel T, Sean, Justin, Matt, Ray, Ron, guys, I appreciate you guys so much. Yeah, Will, it's 2:05 a.m. It is late. I don't know how you're awake right now, how you're listening to me right now. But golly, guys, thank you so much for hanging out tonight. I appreciate your support. Will has droopy eyes. Hopefully he can go to bed. And me too. I'm going to bed in a few minutes. So guys, have a great rest of your Friday night, Saturday tomorrow. And we will see you tomorrow night. Okay, guys? Ray, come back tomorrow. Justin, come back tomorrow. Peace. Ferg, my man. Will, peace.